the wider Silverstone area. We've created a special interest group, like what we're here for today, to bring like-minded business leaders together, talk about all the relevant stuff in their industries. So today's for Wearable Technologies special interest group. So we're very much going to talk about creating a healthier future. So it's very much a medical and healthcare focus. So it should be very exciting. So we've got some fantastic presentations, and I'll introduce them very briefly just before they come up. But yeah, that's kind of everything from me so far. So let's dive into Ruth's presentation and see what that's like, and what we can do from there. Am I going the wrong way? I am going the right way. So I'm not Ruth Williams. I'm obviously Pim. Ruth is not feeling very well, and we'll try and model our way through if that's okay. So Silverstone Park is obviously where you are at today, and Silverstone Park is very much at the heart of the Silverstone Technology Cluster. So it really is the land around the track. So the track is a separate entity. Silverstone Park is obviously a separate entity as well. It's run by an organization called MEPC that are part of Federated Hermes. The interesting thing about MEPC is that the focus for them is weirdly enough not actually the buildings. Even though they're a company that build and run business at Science Park, they're not really that interested in just throwing up a bunch of buildings and leaving people to themselves. For them, it's really about community and creating a sense of belonging, and creating a sense of community on their different sites. I think they've got about 15 different sites in the UK. It's also one of the reasons why MEPC and Silverstone Park were one of the driving forces behind the founding of the Silverstone Technology Cluster, because it's that community feel and making sure that we bring a network together of people that can be mutually beneficial for each other. That's key to them. So the Silverstone Park thing, and this is kind of why I lead with this slide normally, is that it's not necessarily about the business, but it's about the community. So they have lots of different initiatives to do that, and they've got a very defined ethos of what they want to try to achieve with the business parks, as you can read there. I'm not going to go through every single point because I'm optimistically assuming that everybody can read here, so it's there. And this is where it's going to get exciting. Yeah, so some of the specialist facilities that they have on site is there's a sports engineering hub just across the road, which is very much focused at the moment around sort of cycling, but also textiles and all that sort of stuff. And actually the people that work there have been instrumental in helping Team GB win all their cycling gold medals. And I'm reasonably sure there's also plans to put in like a wind tunnel, but with water, an aqua tunnel, to do the same thing for British GB swimming. The maturity facilities where we're here today, so Hexagon have partnered up with Silverstone Park, so obviously behind us you can see the lab that they have. So it's very much about sort of measuring to huge amounts of degrees of accuracy. Of course, this facility is kind of available to rent. So if you've got, if you're not in a position to buy one of those CMM machines yourself, you can actually use this facility and bring that in. Across the road over there is a digital manufacturing center, really sort of leading the way when it comes to additive manufacturing and pushing the boundaries on that, which is really exciting. And then 3C Test is here as well, which is really all about sort of sound and acoustic testing and electromagnetic testing as well. And another great facility for people to make use of. And then business network opportunities, kind of like what we're doing here today. Obviously, Silverstone Park are hosting us, and they're responsible for the pastries and the sandwiches and all that sort of stuff that we'll get later. But yeah, so it's another important thing of the stuff that they do in terms of really making sure that they provide opportunities to bring people together. So they do like different food events and pizza afternoons and all that sort of stuff, which obviously works for me. And then hopefully. Yeah, so some of the community activities, so they organize a lot of sports and a lot of entertainment and pub quizzes and all that sort of stuff. And it's quite a big social calendar to make sure that they create an interesting environment for the companies and for the people that work for the companies to come together and have fun. I'm a big fan of the pub quiz, which is quite fun. And then they're also quite concerned about the future. So they have a Silverstone Park Schools program, which STC actually participates in as well. And basically what we do there is we work together with 4 different schools to, present to the kids, give them a real feel for what's available in the area, what the career opportunities are for them, why STEM careers are actually quite a good idea and sort of what's out there. And just making sure that they're aware of the opportunities available to them, so that hopefully they'll become one of the engineers that all of our guys are crying out for. So that's quite good. And obviously, you know, we go into the school, but the school come over here as well, and then they get to play with Ducatis and all that sort of stuff, which surely is quite fun. I'm worried about all the slides that are coming up that I don't know anything about, such as this one. So apparently they're going to set up a mobility as a service ecosystem. I don't know what that means. But I do know that Silverstone Park are very concerned about, you know, making sure that the sustainability agenda is met, and then looking at ways to improve traffic and transport, you know, sort of on site and to the site as well. But yeah, this is the first ever time I've seen that slide, so I can't say more about that, I'm afraid. Let's look at pretty pictures of buildings, I guess. So this must be one of the new buildings available. I mean, what I do know that Silverstone Park are doing, and this is the new developing that they're going to put in across the road. So they in total have about 2.5 million square feet of pre-planned land available to them. So phase 2 they've put in sort of across the road where the digital manufacturing center is. Phase 3 they've just about finished, and they are fully occupied as well. Phase 4, which is this is going to be part of, as far as I'm aware, it's already 50% let, and they haven't even started building them yet. And I know that they're already on the way with phase 5 as well. So there's a lot of good activities here, and clearly it's quite a desirable place to be. So do talk to somebody at the team, normally Ruth, if you're interested in that sort of stuff. And apparently we're going to have a cafe, gym, and a nursery. Right. What else is there? Presumably this is more available units with their respective sizes, I'm guessing. So there. And yeah, so as I said, they are looking at phase 5 already, which is obviously the next bit across the road, where again, I know they're getting a lot of interest into, and it's expanding all the time quite rapidly. So again, if you're interested, you know, I mean, obviously Ruth is not here now, but if you were interested or is something that you're keen to pursue, get in touch with us, and then obviously we'll put you in touch with Ruth. That's absolutely fine. Sorry, I can't say more about it because I don't really know, I'm afraid. I didn't know I was doing this presentation until about 5 minutes ago. So, so there we go. So the Innovation Center, I can talk to you about that because that's where we are today. So obviously it's more of a, if you don't need your own unit, but you're just looking for an office or indeed virtual tenancy and all that sort of stuff, that's all available here as well. So it's very, very easy to set up. Actually, Silverstone Technology Cluster has a virtual tenancy here ourselves. It works really well, super friendly staff. Obviously there's available meeting rooms and facilities and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, well worth looking at if you want to present at Silverstone Park, even if you don't want to get, you know, your own unit established. And the agile workspace you may have seen when you come in, so that's available for everybody to just sort of come in, work away, you know, use it as a base. Obviously it's a very central location. It's quite nice to meet clients as well, but it's very much there for anybody, whether you're a tenant or not. You know, if you want to use the space, please do. And there's some availability still in the building, I'm guessing from that. So yeah, again, if you're interested in having an office, you know, get in touch with us and we'll have a look, and we'll put you in touch with Ruth. And I think that might be it. Yeah, that is it. So there, not great, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an overview of Silverstone Park, as much as I can give it. I'm sure it would have been a lot better with Ruth, but you know, there we are. You have to do with me, I'm afraid. So, but as I said, you know, if you're interested in any of that sort of stuff, get in touch with us and we'll put you in touch and we'll sort it out. So then we'll move on with the actual event. So our first speaker is Simon Mcmaster from Footfalls and Heartbeats, which make all of these wonderful things, and it's very much in terms of putting the sensors in the textiles and things. But I'll leave Simon to explain. So enjoy. Thank you.
G'day, folks. Hi all. Hope you're all very well. Very nice to see you here today. So, as you can tell, I don't have a Pommy accent. I'm from New Zealand originally. The company was originally started at home, started in New Zealand, but we moved it up to the UK in 2000. I've lived here for the last 20 years, but we moved it completely up to the UK in 2016. And the company Footfalls and Heartbeats was a silly idea of mine 20 years ago this year, baking muffins in a cafe in Bristol while at the Open University doing a degree. I wondered whether you could make textiles that sensed various different parameters and physiological outliers that the human beings have in a very simple and easy way. And so that's why Footfalls was started. And if my accent is far too strong, I apologize and ask me to interpret for you along the way. Okay. So the reason Footfalls was started is I grew up in a really egalitarian country, New Zealand, and it's very much about treating everybody the same way and allowing everybody to get the same sort of care. And healthcare worldwide is really expensive and a lot of people can't get it. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to put it into everything that you interact with. And this statistic is, even though you probably won't believe it, true. Unless you're one of these people that wanders off to work naked every morning, this is what happens, okay? 99% of your life you spend touching textiles. You sit on them in your car, you plane, train, anywhere you go, clothes you put on every day, seats at work, anything that you do, we can put sensors into. A couple of the team are here with me today, sitting in the back row, and the charming young lady, Maddie, is a knitter from the University of Derby, an utter genius when it comes to knitting, and Footfalls wouldn't be where it is today without her skills. And I heard Pim talking earlier about getting younger people interested, and that's one of our key concerns and stuff, because a lot of the technicians are now my age, which is a lot older than Maddie, okay? and are leaving the industry, and we don't have anybody to replace them with. The UK used to have a textile industry, but doesn't really anymore. And even if you went overseas and stuff, they're still really, really hard to find. So but what we get back to is all of these things have textiles in them, including those wind turbine blades. Okay? They are made with textiles. And you knit to hold the textiles together. And so right at the very end, I'll show you something that's not necessarily about rehabilitation and prehabilitation. It's actually about that, about how you can put the stuff in absolutely everything. Now, the reason we use them is, you'll see on here, we wanted everything to be connected, intelligent, and affordable. So I don't know whether any of you know, the Americans spend $3 trillion a year on their healthcare, 3-point-something trillion, of which 30% is not required. Okay, 3 trillion a year just to keep your people healthy. And as such, it becomes unaffordable for a vast percentage of the population. We wanted to make it affordable and make it invisible. Like, you can see these things, and I'll hand them around during the talk today about exactly how invisible they are. Okay, so for example, I'll take this one. This is one of only about 4 in the world. My staff will never be knitting this again, ever. It's just a nightmare. It has 12 pressure sensors in it. These little grey areas, they're pressure sensors. And it is all completely knitted. There is not one piece of electronics in this. That's knitted, the power's knitted, the data's knitted, and you put electronics on the end of it so that you can gather some information. Okay, so that's all you do. Everything, you can wash it 150 times, still works. Okay, so, but this one we did for a very, very big company, who's very big athletic company, whose first initial is A, and you'll know who that is, and I don't like them anymore because we had to knit this for them, and it's still sitting in a box, never been opened, never been used. So it makes it very difficult and stuff. And you can see on the right-hand side here the opportunities of what you can do. Because you interact with textiles so often, you are able to gather information at almost every moment of the day, all times. You don't have to remember your Fitbit. You don't have to put a watch on. Don't have to take your phone with you. These charming things have pressure sensors in them. They take 13 minutes to knit. I can measure your gait. I can measure whether you have had a neurological injury. I can measure your gait. I can measure you whether you've had, so in terms of prehabilitation and rehabilitation, if you're going to have a knee replacement, you wear these for 6 to 8 weeks beforehand. I can check your gait, get your knee put back in, put them back on again. You don't even have, you go and see the physio once, tells you the exercises, don't have to go back and see them. Just do it with this. And he or she can check the outcome of that. If they need to, they're going, yes, you're doing terribly well, or no, you haven't been out this week. You know, it's all of those things that you can do. And then the other things we have here, there are challenges with this. So the biggest challenge you have with knitted textiles and smart textiles is the connection for the electronics, okay? At the moment, you'll see we have these really, really smart, intelligent poppers, which you can buy at any shop. They're really ugly, but it's one of the quickest ways to get the stuff on. We don't use these. We use these because we do R&D. We don't actually manufacture this. We license our technology, okay? So we have to use these, but it's one of the hardest things to do because this is completely flexible and the electronics as a general rule isn't. So it just makes it really hard to attach the one to the other. So that's one of the things. And also trying to remove some of the things that people would like us to do are very complex. This was one of them. So we have our knitting machine at our place, which I think I've got a picture of in here. Yes, I have. I've got a picture of it here, which is the only one of its kind in the UK working at the moment. And it knits these and the shoes, all right? Now, it comes from a really big Italian company, and they had to change their software completely for us to be able to do this. We've sent them, we're knitting some shoes at the moment, and we send it back and saying, we asked them to do things that they've never been asked to do before. So it has a drum like this on it with 144 needles in it, and we were doing 256 individual movements in each rotation. And we wanted to do more than 256. And they went, yeah, nobody does more than that. And we said, well, we do. So they had to change the software again. So you can, this is an amazing complexity into this. And I can form it over anybody's shape. So the reason we chose knitting is with the gentleman here, all your business shirts, including my stylish business shirt, are woven, okay? T-shirts are knitted. That's over almost any organic shape. So that's why we use it, okay? So that's what we're trying to do. Now this is what people think knitting is. And if you ask Maddie afterwards, she'll assure you that knitting isn't like this, okay? Everybody's grandma, granddad, or whatever, sits down, pair of needles, where they go. However, what we do uses exactly the same principle. And as a matter of serendipity, we ended up in Nottingham. And this type of weft knitting on a machine was invented in Nottingham 415 years ago by a guy called the Reverend William Lee. It was so revolutionary that the English king decided that he couldn't allow anybody to use it because it put people out of jobs, so it was sent to France. Then it eventually came back. William Lee came back today and looked at our knitting machine, the machines that Maddie uses. It's exactly the same, it's just quicker, faster, more needles. Exactly the same. So that's what people think knitting is. Ooh, this is what knitting is. Okay, so the machine in the middle, bottom middle, is the Santoni X. So it's a circular machine, 144 needles, knits socks and shoes. Okay, and the other one is a stole, where you can see Maddie's delightful fingers in that picture. That's a stole, and that has 36 feeders, I think. 36? 30. See, there we go. I had no idea. I'm found with the company, don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so 30, and that we knit a lot of the products on. So some of the products you'll see that I'm wearing today have, a lot of the products have been knitted on the flatbed machine. Circular stuff is for things like this. So I talked about the shoes. You can pass this around. So this here is this. These are all the sensors. I'll turn it back the other way, but I'll pass it around. That's it. Sock comes off the machine, finished, glue it on. So that's all you have to do. And what we're trying to do is get people to start to use this so that they can get used to having this in their daily lives. And those are the machines we do it on. So we're based in Nottingham. We have these two machines in Nottingham, and we do R&D, and we do R&D there. Okay. So this literally is the sensor. So when you see it come around, the grey area is the sensor. It's an electrically conductive yarn, two gold yarns that go. They look gold, they're silver, hideously expensive, but they take data out, power in. So you have to power each one and stuff, and it comes back out again. So hang on, I think I've got, I don't know where have I put my electronics. Oh, yes, I do. That's an electronics at the moment. This is how small it is. We put it in here to clip in this to get it to work. We can make them small and stuff. We make them for the shoes as well. But that's the sensor. So this measures pressure, not absolute. We can't do absolute pressure. We can do relative pressure, and we can also measure strain as well. Okay, and then we can do certain other things that are a little bit different. And the reason you use this, it's incredibly low cost. It's as durable as the textile is, so it's not going to wear out before your shoes, socks, shirt, chair, anything wears out. Like I said, washable, conformable, which means you can fit it over almost any shape. Okay, which is it's incredibly useful when you want to do things. And we have made a point of not making anybody change their manufacturing or supply chain. You can knit this on any knitting machine anywhere in the world. Nothing fancy. Well, sorry, Maddie. Yes, very fancy. But the knitting machines you can get anywhere. Okay, absolutely anywhere. So that's what this is what we do. So the textile is the sensor, is exactly what I mean. No nothing. No, you press it when it comes around. No nothing in it at all, but measures what you need it to. Okay, so what can we measure? So relative pressure is something or somebody there. So we've just finished a car seat for an automotive manufacturer, sent it back to the States, 46 sensors in it. And they're going to try and make it a smart seat. So you sit in it and you're uncomfortable. If you keep moving in your seat, you're uncomfortable. Because we've got 46 sensors, we can see you moving. They're going to try and use AI to make the seat change its shape for you perfectly without any controls on the side of it. Okay? So same thing with this, with the prehab and rehab, the thing that we're talking about here is, so we've just been asked by a wheelchair manufacturer to put it in a cushion in a wheelchair for exactly the same thing. Am I comfortable? Have I been sitting too long on one side? Have I not been sitting, am I moving around enough? Am I doing my pressure relief exercises? Yes or no? So that's what you do there. This one, strain, so same thing, just stretch it. Does exactly the same thing, okay? So we can measure, so that's what this is. Sorry about the legs, they're a bit horrible. That's what this is, that's a strain sensor. And at the end, I'll get Adam to show at the end and stuff, but if I do this, it picks up my full range of motion and tells me whether I'm doing the exercise correctly. So if I'm rehabilitating from an ACL or something like that, or I've had a knee or a hip or something like that put in, it allows me to check all of that and stuff as well. Okay. Same thing. I will take some of these off. They get a bit hot after a while. So this one. So my elbow. Yeah. Same thing. Osteoarthritis, broken your arm. That's all you need to have. And at the moment, you just see them as sleeves, but you can put them into base layer garments. So if you're having to wear base layer garments for all that sort of stuff, you can put it into all of those things. Okay. So this is, we have spent a long time doing this from a stupid idea I had 20 years ago. And without all of the staff that I have, and I'll always say this, like, not in a million years would we be where I am. I think up stupid ideas, sit in the corner, these guys get to make it. And they do an amazing job. There's some very, very, very talented people here. And then Bioelectrics is the other one. This is really cool, this one. So, and I'll show you some output from these in a bit. But this here, and I'll pass it around. Yeah, that's the right way around. So if you turn this inside out, you can put it on your leg or your arm. That's an EMG sensor. Don't have to stick anything on. And I'll show you the output from this. We were asked by somebody in Strathclyde to knit one. Maddie and I went, okay. And I asked Maddie, and in an afternoon, she knit 2 of them. We sent them up to him the next day. We'd never knitted one before. Sent them up the next day to him, and I'll show you the output later on, this one. He went, really? You've never done this before? And I went, no, not ever. Okay, so that we can do EMG. Heart rate, ECG we have done, but it's very hard because everybody has to sit. almost completely still while you're doing it. So it's still really hard. So we don't try and do that. But this one here, we think is really good for prehabilitation, rehabilitation, neurological injury, stroke, trying to see if the muscles are firing, if their left-hand side has been, damaged, trying to see so you can measure their gait with this. If they have a pair of socks on as well, you can see whether the muscles firing. And if the muscles aren't firing, can you give them a different exercise? Can you get them to do a bit more? Can you get them to do a bit less? It's all, I hope that at the end of me wittering on, you will get the idea that it's incredibly, it's an incredibly easy way to get information off humans, okay? And I'm not going to say it's incredibly easy to do because we are one of only 3 companies in the world who can do this. So the UK has one of only 3 companies in the world that can do this. And that's an extraordinary thing to say about a country that doesn't really have a textile industry anymore. So in New Zealand, we have no textile industries, which is why I had to come up here. But, that's why. And here we have it here. So this is giving you a bit of an idea of what we can do. Sensors in the middle again. So I'll be showing you some things later on, the output of what we've got. So you've got the shoes bottom, running, car seat. So I put that in rather than a wheelchair seat. You put a rotation parts of it, you can see. And the VR one is very, very interesting. A lot of people are looking to, especially for the elderly amongst the population, me, they are looking to do their exercises, get it gamified, so they make sure that they do their exercise at home, so they don't have to go in, so it doesn't cost a fortune, so they can do them at home. And we're doing one with dysphagia at the moment, which once again I will show you at the end. So dysphagia, lose the ability to swallow when you have a stroke, and they have to reteach. They have to reteach the pathway. Okay, and we have made this lovely thing, which will also come around, which does, I won't strangle myself, but it does fit around here. That is the sensor. That's it. Okay, you put it there, right on your example, do it up, and I'm going to strangle myself. Yeah, do it up, and if this moves, and I'll show you at the end, they get that to start again in the VR thing and teach the people how to swallow again. And that's just about to go to some patients. All right, and I will keep saying really simple, not really simple. Maddie will stab me on the way home in the car. Okay, really quite tricky. All right, but this is what I mean by prehabilitation and rehabilitation. It's to save healthcare systems money. You need to do this. You can't have people going into hospital all the time. It's ridiculous. In the 21st century, we still have people wandering into hospital when it could be done remotely. It's just bizarre. And so that's why we're trying to get this going and why we're trying to do it. As I said, we license our stuff and get it going that way. So, that's quite good. So this one, is this going to, yeah. So look, 2 areas, we've got more focus than this, but 2 areas for prehabilitation, rehabilitation, both of these, okay? So the prehabilitation in sport is not necessarily prehabilitation, it's more training, but the rehab is from injury, absolutely. In the medical, it's definitely both, okay? Like I said, hips, knees, anything like that, where you need somebody to check what's happening, because a lot of people think nowadays that if you get people to walk around a bit more, to become a little bit fitter before they go and have a hip or a knee replaced, it's an easier operation. They get a better outcome at the other side. It's all of these things. It's all of this stuff that we're trying to make people understand that a simple process such as knitting can lead to a worldwide revolution in all of this very easily. COVID didn't strike at the best time for us. It was really quite difficult, but we are now doing lots of really cool things. This knee sleeve, we got funding for this. And this is basically, this is a product. We'll show you, I'll show you something at the end from where Adam will grab his laptop and just pop it up here. And it's basically a product. So we can get it out there and we can start using it in the sport or rehabilitation sector. So starting to talk about performance. So you saw the car seat. So like I said, this could be anything, could be your wheelchair seat, could be absolutely anything. So The blue line is the pressure that we applied in kilopascals. Okay, and I said it can't do absolute pressure, and it can't. So anybody who tells you it can, they're lying. No need to textile can, because you can see it's not exactly right, but we can predict roughly where it is. So if we can give you a range. So in the top one, say it's 30 kPa, I could say to you that's between 28 and 32. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is because we don't know. But that's how accurate the knitting has become. That little sensor you saw in the shoe, that's what that does. Okay, that's exactly how accurate we can make things that we do. These are these, and whoever's got the shoe with the 6 sensors in it. Yeah, that's right, Matt. So, cheers, eh? Oh, sorry. This comes out of something very similar to this. So sprinting for 10 seconds and then walking for 10 seconds. And what you can see is, so I can't go too close, you can see the different colors and they represent the different sensors. And I think it's he's looking really carefully. I think it's the yellow one is the heel hitting. Heel always hits first. And then if you pronate or supinate, your foot goes like that or the other way. We can tell that from that. We can get all the timings. We can do absolutely everything. We can do the full gait cycle out of a pair of knitted shoes. All right. And we think that this is one of our products that we're most proud of, because we think that this would revolutionize how you do physio, prehab, and rehab in the NHS or any health service. They could just buy the shoes and give them out, basically. You know, at whatever they'd be a pair, would be probably half the price it costs for one visit to the physio. It's all done once you give them one of those. So yeah, there's all that stuff. This is my charming EMG sensor. This was knitted 2 days before. The yellow one is a clinical grade 9,000 pound sensor attached to your leg. The red one's ours. And the guy just said, it's fine. We don't need to see all the peaks and bits and pieces. I need to know whether their muscle's firing. That tells me whether their muscle fires. That would cost a pound. That wouldn't have cost a pound in materials and knitting time. A bit of a difference. And we're really quite proud of that because we'd never done it before and it worked. So that was really cool. So this in combination with, say, the arm sleeve or the leg sleeve that I've got on and stuff, you can see now how you can get multiple sensors all in one place in a bit of clothing that somebody can throw in the wash like they normally would. Obviously, they have to take this off, but they can throw it in the wash like they normally would, and away they go. Yeah? And this one is dysphagia. So this is you learning how to swallow again. Top left is you're talking. Okay? Top right is just moving your head around. Bottom left, bottom right, swallows. Okay? And that is a minute signal, absolutely minute. You're in somebody who doesn't have dysphagia, I think this moves out 15 mil at most. That's all we're measuring. And in people who have dysphagia, it doesn't move out nearly that much. And that's all we're doing. So that somebody can then be sitting at home, play the game on their own telly with their VR and stuff and bits and pieces, and do the exercises all the time, get themselves better and better. So, because I never realized how debilitating it is and stuff. You can't have drinks and stuff. It's just really, really hard because they have to physically see when they're tipping because their brain's forgotten how to swallow. You know, which is just, you know, it's incredibly difficult. Now, before I start this, Adam, can you grab that video, mate? So before I start this, Adam's just going to put this up here and we'll play this video. Now, this comes from the sleeve. You can play the video, mate. I'm sorry I didn't put it. I might give you the slide to add afterwards, okay? But the video is the output from this sleeve. Okay? So me doing this is what you're seeing. Tells you how deep you go, eccentric, concentric movement, all of those things is from this, and there's not a wire or anything in this. Nothing. So it's just extraordinary what you can do with knitted textiles. Okay, absolutely extraordinary. And one last thing that I thought I would throw in, because it's really quite important for you to understand that knitting and textiles go in everything. So like I explained to you, knitting is in both of those planes. They make that plane and the wind turbine. That plane may cost $35 billion or whatever ridiculous amount of money is. Your mum, grandma, granddad or something could get a pair of knitting needles and knit how to put the carbon fibre in if you wanted them to. There is knitting inside something that costs that much money, okay? And the reason I'm putting this up is because, particularly with rehabilitation, so if people need knee braces, that sort of thing and stuff, but a carbon fibre in them, we can tell absolute pressure, absolute strain and temperature out of carbon fibre. And all we do is knit 2 electrically conductive yarns into that piece of carbon fibre, set it, grab the connections at the end, you get a result. So I do apologise to, and I keep apologising to Maddie, because it sounds like it's really, really simple, and it really ain't, okay? But once you get it to work, it is really simple. You can just make yards and yards and yards of it. And I'll show you here how accurate this is. There you go. That's a piece of composite that's been flexed, and that signal is coming out of knitted yarn that would be about 500 micron. That's it. So, you know, this is why we believe that we've got one of the best technologies out there, and why we think that in the modern world, healthcare should become, I definitely think it should become more democratic, but that's just the country I come from. But I think it should be more democratic, and I think it should be cheaper. And there's no reason why it can't be cheaper. The only reason that it's expensive, and I apologise if there are any healthcare companies here, really big ones, okay? But the only reason it's really expensive is because people can, it's just, they get written a blank check all the time. It's utterly ridiculous. You know, I could make 500 pairs of these and sell them to the NHS for, let's say, 500 pairs of those with all the electronics and the bits and pieces, let's say £10,000. That's 500 patients that would never have to go and see their physio or their doctor or their occupational health person, ever. They could do it all at home. They could be shown online. They could start to walk around. They could get all the response to it. And I guarantee that 10,000 quid would probably pay for one of those, would pay for what, maybe a tenth what one of those people might get paid in a year. So it's just, as far as we're concerned, it really is a no-brainer, basically. And the last one here is just, you know, saying thanks very much for listening to this annoying, boring New Zealander, okay? But it's also this thing about touch. Humans exist on touch. Almost everything that you do, you touch other humans, you touch desks, your clothes touch you. We all exist on touch. That touch is how our textiles work. We're just measuring that touch. That's all we're doing, and we think we do a reasonably good job at it. And you have all listened to me very politely and very quietly, and thank you very much for your time.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. We're doing a Q&A panel a little bit later on, so we can have any questions until then, I think. But
Cheers, man.
That was great. Thank you very much, Simon. I always like it when people hand out samples as well. Yeah, fantastic. Right, our next speaker, looking into GPS tracking, I'm guessing. Yeah. So Stuart, over to you. Yeah, this should be a fascinating thing as well. So please tell us all about it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me here. What I'll do is go through the story of Meili. Really, it's a spin-off from Location Extreme. The journey started a few years ago with myself and one of the other directors at work, who was quite interested in expanding what we were doing into a field that was, I guess, more to do with our hobbies in life, really, if I'm honest about it. We started mainly Earth because myself and the co-owner have an interest in the outdoors. There's me down there in Iceland testing out the devices. And one thing that he does a lot is Duke of Edinburgh expeditions to schools. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And it's a unique thing to the UK that's spread around the Commonwealth. It's incredibly popular. I think 400,000 children every year in the UK engage in Duke of Edinburgh expeditions. And we're so health and safety conscious in schools at the moment that you can't use conkers. You know, if you go outside, you got to put on suntan lotion, but you got to do it yourself. Your kids can't, you know, the teacher can't do it. And yet, with Duke of Edinburgh, we're quite happy to have 300 to 400,000 kids a year go on 3-4 day expeditions, and we push them out the door, and they're not allowed to take mobile phones with them. That's a given for it. And they sleep out in the wild somewhere. Groups of sort of 3 or 4 of them, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, and they come back again. And we said, you know, wouldn't it be interesting if we just had a very simple concept, we just give them a tracker each. So we looked into it, and of course there are, as you'd imagine, there are companies out there doing this stuff, but it costs thousands of pounds to have a tracker. They get rented. We looked at the trackers themselves because what we were interested in doing initially was just creating a cloud platform. We thought we'd have this cloud platform that would allow you to see where everybody is, and if anybody gets into trouble, it will report back, ping SMS messages. It's a very straightforward concept. And we looked at the trackers, and of course we thought we'll just get an OEM tracker off the shelf, marry it up with our app and our technology, and away we go. And again, you know, after sort of 6 months of searching markets, we found the same problem, which was that trackers were made in the same place, which you can imagine where that is. They all have the firmware, so the actual, you know, the coding of that tracker communicates with the servers from that country for the most part. So before they can get to any cloud over here, they've got to be pinged through a third-party server in, you know, what some might consider an unfriendly environment if you're talking about data and sharing and privacy and so on. And the worst part was that all of the battery life claims were completely false. If you've ever used your mobile phone and tried to go from A to B and not had your USB charger in the car, you know it kills your phone, and that's probably an £800,000 phone with a top-end lithium-ion battery, and battery technology management in it is superb. But you still ain't going to get there and back if you haven't taken a USB cable with you, because that's GPS, you know, pinging a satellite all day just takes a lot of energy, and it's difficult to do. So we started this journey and said, let's from the ground up in Oxford build our own hardware, and we engaged with Innovate UK, got a grant from them. We engaged with the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield, and just, you know, all the range of catapults that you've got in the UK is awesome. And latterly with Medilink as well, who helped us to do some work with the next part of it that I'll come into. And then and the other thing we wanted to look at was there's 2 sort of types of GPS tracker. There's that will ping off the satellite to get its location, and then it will ping off the satellite again, normally through a comms company, to actually send its location. Now that part is incredibly expensive. You have to have a satellite communications contract, and you know how much they cost if you ever try to get one of those. And also it's not foolproof. As we found with our testing, if you're in a valley and there's no satellite overhead, and you go down and you break your leg, you know, you're screwed either way. You're not going to get a signal. So so we looked at it and thought, can we do this another way? The way that the world has gone with telecoms is we in the UK and a lot of the Western world, we started putting cables in the ground, copper, and then other cables in the ground. We built our telecoms infrastructure that way. But the rest of the world, you know, hasn't necessarily gone down that route, and the kind of places where people want to go to when they go traveling hasn't gone down that route. So they have basically, there's radio signals everywhere in the world. To cut a long story short, and we thought, could we use those radio signals on any band and use that to communicate location? And that was one of the premises of this as well. And we've tested it in the far remote regions of Canada, in the Rockies in the north. We've been to Iceland, to the Arctic coast, to traveled from Reykjavik to Husavik for 7 hours, then went to the most remote locations, the most sparsely populated country in Europe. It's tough, but someone had to do it, you know, and found that it works. It just simply works, and it works We have different modes for update, so you can decide to update in real time, every 5 minutes, every half an hour. You know, if you're walking, you'd probably do every half an hour. And then we just use the software ideas to say we know where it's been, where's it likely to have gone. If, for example, it has dropped out of into a dead spot, although we didn't find any in any of our testing, we haven't found any dead spots yet. And the yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. The other thing we took into it was the software side of it. I guess were interesting was we looked at the Geofence, which is a very simple idea. You said we know where the device is. If it steps out of that locale, we want an alert. So that's fairly straightforward. Then we looked at it and said, can we geo-route? So we say we know that this device is supposed to go from A to B via C. If it deviates from that route, can we have an alert pinged to let us know that they've wandered off course? And then we started thinking about all the applications for that, and there are so many. You know, frankly, my cousin wanted one because his daughter walks to his primary school and back every day. He wants to know if she goes 50 meters off route. You know, we looked at it from the perspective of Duke of Edinburgh expedition. You know, a group of kids go out. We've been testing with loads of different schools across the UK who absolutely love it because we always have a control group. And we have the not control group, the one with the melee. And in our first test, you know, one group went off one way and got lost. And they had a little brick phone in a plastic bag, and they phoned up and they said, "Where are you?" "Oh, we don't know because we're lost." That's the nature of being lost. They said, "What can you see?" "You see some sheep, you see some trees." So you see the teacher just going out of his mind as somebody had forgotten their EpiPen, and it was all getting very, very hairy. And then the other group, one of the other teachers went, "Oh, I've got an alert on my phone from one of the melees," and one of the girls had fallen over and twisted her knee. And so he just got on his mountain bike, rode out there, it routed it straight to the location. And we think that was just a perfect example of how you know, the geo-routing, we can see that things are going wrong. Anyway, that's the background with Melee Earth. As ever, I'm going to click this. So, yeah. No, I'll give it a roll. There we go. You come to a crossroads in life, and often that crossroads is influenced by personal experience. In this case, the personal experience was who I'm going to call George, who elderly, lives alone, he's a widower, and he lives with dementia. And he has 3 daughters, all living in different cities. He lives in, I won't tell you where he lives, but anyway, everybody involved in this story is a complete and utter technophobe and can't stand technology, can't get their heads around it at all. And yeah, George loves to wander. It was desperately trying to keep him out of going into a care home and losing the freedom he had. He was able to function, able to carry on, but he has this tendency, he will go out a few times a day, and those trips are becoming more concerning as they went on. And you know, the only way sometimes we could get him home again was for one of my colleagues to pretend to be Brigadier Smythe and tell him that he's to return to barracks, and he would. So we started to look at that and say, can we get can we use these trackers to help him to continue with his quality of life, so he doesn't have to be confined away. So we know when he's gone out, we know where he's gone, and we can find him on the way back again. And then, of course, from our perspective, we started looking and understanding a bit more about Alzheimer's, about dementia, and the challenge in it. And the figures are staggering. The 2019 figure over there, that is now 900,000 people, just within England, will suffer from dementia. That's 1 in 14 of the population over 65. And again, in an aging population, it's a staggering number. Connected to that is who cares for these people. And in a room this size, I know that there will be several of you who have relatives that experience dementia and live with it, and you're probably the ones who are caring for them. And if you're not, you know, they will have some care. But 540,000 unpaid carers, 500,000 people in the UK who are caring for relatives with dementia at the moment. And in a room of this size again, you know, sitting in threes, the chances are that 1 of every 3 of you is going to be looking after somebody with dementia at some point in your life. The economic cost is extraordinary, £23 billion a year, of which 40% of that is attributed to those 500,000 unpaid carers. So it's people who are paying for it out of their parents' money. We talked about, you know, the idea that you spend your entire life buying a house, paying off the mortgage, And then when you get to the other end, and you're one of those 1 in 3 people that suffers from dementia, your house will then be used in order to pay for your care at £1,080, £50,000 a year. I think, you know, those kind of numbers. It's an extraordinary dynamic, and it is combined more than the economic cost of cancer, heart disease, and stroke. So we're not trying to fix the world here, we're just looking at a little part of it that we can have an influence on, and that is wandering behaviour, which is this compulsion to leave home affects 15 to 60% of people with dementia. And of course, connected with that is the risk of getting lost, the strain on the emergency services, the police getting called out a lot. There's obviously the risk of somebody coming to harm when they're lost, or falling in a canal, or getting lost in the woods, or just, you know, and worse, the mind runs away. There's a statistic there, 40% of people getting lost outside the home. One of the consequences is you know, the strain on the emergency services, particularly the police. And then you might have noticed that there was, you probably didn't know, but there was a pilot scheme down in Avon and Somerset Police recently, where they looked at using one of these off-the-shelf trackers to see if they could help to find where people that they knew were suffering from dementia or wandering were at any point. So the police would say, have access to that data with the permission of the families, and if one of those people wandered, they'd be able to find them a lot quicker. And it was a great idea, but as with all things, I think Simon alluded to it, the cost of this was astronomical. So by the time, I think the local water company had sponsored it, the Test Trust had sponsored it, and it had been subbed out to, again, I'm going to apologise that you did, one of these large companies, they managed to gather together the grand total of 30 trackers for the entirety of the Avon and Somerset region. The pilot was, for that reason, a failure, frankly, because it doesn't need to be that expensive. This is the thing that we've found, which I'll come on to in a little while. The consequences of wandering behaviour, and of families and of authorities becoming concerned about it, is that it hastens that need to put somebody in a home, and with it, the economic costs that comes without, the strains on the family, the upset and the loss of liberty and of quality of life for the person who's experiencing that. So assistive technology has been around in this area a little while. There are significant challenges to it. The first one is simply the cost. If you were one of those £500,000 unpaid carers, the need to care for your family will have impacted upon your ability to earn money. And as a result, the idea of having a £360 per year subscription on a device that is costing you hundreds of pounds as well, it's just not realistic. There's issues around protection of civil liberties, data consent, and so on, particularly if somebody's ability to function is degraded somewhat, and that's a consideration that has to be thought about. There's one of the things that has come up repeatedly, and we had this with George, was the idea of being tagged. And if you look at a lot of the devices that are out there, they've just next generation, well, not next generation, they're last generation tags that used to go on offenders when they come out of prison. They are not something you want to put onto an elderly relative. You don't want to have a huge wristband that looks on their ankle. It's a stigma around that. One of the other things that, just to allude to, is that this is not a fix-all. It's not the solution. It's an aid to allow somebody to continue with their quality of life. It's not something that's going to replace good quality dementia care. It's not going to be something that's going to replace police and the services that are around it there. Our motto, our mission at work is innovative and disruptive technology. And so we took the Made Earth idea and turned it into Made Safe. That's actually a smaller device. We've got various different designs coming out. Our goal with this is that it will be so cheap that you can literally give George or whoever else 3 or 4 of them to stick one on his walking stick, stick one in his coat pocket, stick one in his belt buckle, stick one in his wallet. You know, all the things, because people do have habits, and as they do go out, they do grab their walking stick or their purse or their handbag, stick it in them anywhere in a very unobtrusive way. And crucially, we're not trying to link this up with the police or the emergency services. The app is hosted in the UK. The cloud that we're using is the Microsoft Azure cloud in data centers here in the UK. We're using the internet banking security system so that you cannot get at that data outside of the UK. And if we, hopefully do go worldwide with it, we'll keep that localized model. The idea with this is that as those devices go out, that you simply ping. It simply pings and lets you know when he's gone outside the house, when he's gone for a walk. If he's gone for a walk and he's gone away from his usual walk, it lets you know, lets the family know that. All the family members can have it as an app on their mobile phone. So the 3 daughters in this case will see, oh, George has gone for a walk, and as long as he goes home again, that's absolutely fine. It's if he doesn't go home. And so the price is one of our disrupting targets on this. Yeah, so the subscriptions that are out there on sort of £50–75 a month, we're just going to do £6 a month per device. And for trusts and schools we're talking to, we're doing enterprise teams that are way less. Our goal is obviously volume rather than trying to be greedy with it. We think this is something that can make a real difference. The other means of disrupting is the technology we've used to made the Earth is so good with the battery life, so good with keeping, even in real time. When I was up in Iceland, I was in the most remote areas I've been in my life by myself, walking through canyons and waterfalls. It was fantastic. But at the same time, I knew that this thing was pinging in real time to the satellite back to the location in the UK. And what I had to do was pop that cap on the bottom and press the SOS button. And at some point, somebody would have looked at it and come looking for me. That battery life was on real time, lasted for 14 days. So it pinged for 24 hours every second for 24 hours, 365 days a year to do it. And it lasted for 14 days. So when we move that to every 5 minutes, we're getting battery life for 3 months. We move it to every half an hour, it goes even further. So we scale it down and put it into this, and we realized that you cannot give a GPS tracker to somebody at home on a fob or on a keyring and say to them, if they're suffering from dementia, don't forget to charge it. It has to stay on for weeks at a time, and it has to stay on, and it has to be cheap enough so the family member can literally just come in and just switch them around and say, bring one that they've got charged and keep it on for another couple of months, and to keep them safe. So that's mainly safe. That's the idea behind it. Going too long, I think I've got a promo video from work here that I'm going to try and run that just pretty much summarizes all that information.
It worked earlier.
Let's try it again. If it doesn't work, it's fine.
Can we try to roll on?
Try rolling. There we go. There we go. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Very, very good. Thank you. Really good stuff, and weirdly recognizable. I love going to Iceland, and I've been in similar situations where you're walking around, and it occurred to me many a time that if something was to happen, that's game over. We've been there. So yeah, I'd like to take one of those next time I go, please. Thank you very much. Good stuff. Right, as I said before, we can do question and answer sessions later. So we've got one coming up. So I think we'll have a bit of a break now. And actually we're running slightly ahead of schedule, so we can give you all slightly longer. So let's take I would say 15-minute break. Let's all get a tea, coffee and pastry or whatever else is out there, and then reconvene here in about 15 minutes, and then we'll carry on. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, let's see. Can you hear us?
I can indeed. Can you see me on the screen?
Yeah, we can see you. We can hear you. God, this is all very exciting. This might actually work now.
Everything's working. It's a good sign.
Right. Welcome back, everybody. We basically are now switching online a little bit. So our next presenter is Zeke from Mcmaster. Zeke, over to you. Let's dive straight in. Why not?
Yep, right away. So yeah, it's wonderful to be here, albeit virtually. I wish I could have made it to see some of Simon's samples, but perhaps we can connect after the call. So my name is Zeke, and I'm the founder of an award-winning care tech startup called Milbotics. And we're creating innovative wearable technologies to enable better care, primarily for people with communication difficulties, such as people living with dementia. We're supported financially by Alzheimer's Society, which is the UK's leading dementia charity, and also by Unlimited, which is a social charity. And I'm here today really to share my journey in bringing our technology from the research labs out into the real world where it can make hopefully make an impact. There we go. So a bit about me. In addition to being the founder of Milbotics, I'm also a visiting fellow at the Centre for Health and Clinical Research at UWE. But my background is very much in the technology sphere. I'm not a clinician at all. I studied electronic and electrical engineering at Loughborough, and I then went to work in the defence sector for about 10 years, mainly focused on software development, but also dabbling in a bit of electronics and data science. It was during my time working in defence that I was touched personally by dementia. And as a result of this, I decided to pursue a PhD investigating how technology could potentially support dementia carers. So really drawing on my background as a technologist to try and deliver some sort of social impact through technology. I completed my PhD last year, which was in robotics and autonomous systems at the Bristol Robotics Laboratory. And really, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to my great-grandmother, Kath, who's shown on the left here. She was very much a figurehead of our family, and it was really through witnessing her journey with dementia and deterioration in health and behaviour that I became motivated to try and find a technological solution for some of the challenges that family carers face with dementia. And this continues to be my and our team focus within Milbotics. And Kath was a really remarkable lady. She had this incredibly rich life story. So when World War II broke out, Kath volunteered to support the British war effort against the advice of her parents, and she ended up becoming a truck driver, ferrying war materials between British Army bases, which was remarkable at the time. As a lady, you know, these things generally didn't happen. It was while doing this that she met my great-grandfather, who's shown on the right, and his name was Ken, and he was a trumpeter in the Highlanders Regiment, and that's why you see him wearing a kilt. So they had this whirlwind romance and fell madly in love, and got married after the war. And then Ken became a professional jazz musician, so he would play at various venues around the country, and Kath would follow him. She never missed one of his concerts, and she had this lifelong passion for jazz that never really diminished even towards the end of her life. But sadly, in later years, Kath developed dementia, and she became increasingly dependent on family for support. And it was really my grandmother, Sue, who became her carer. And she did a great job. She took very good care of Kath, but as her symptoms progressed, she found it increasingly difficult to cope. And as you know, certainly from Stuart's talk, dementia is a neurodegenerative disease, so the symptoms do get worse over time. And actually about half of people with dementia become agitated and aggressive. And it's these behavioural symptoms that are extremely challenging for family carers and often precipitate then entry into a care home. Maybe some of you on this call have experienced yourselves of the sort of behavioural symptoms, which are really tough. So the situation with Kath and Sue reached a peak one Christmas when Kath accused Sue of stealing some of her money and actually became quite violent. So Sue was now fearing for her safety. She didn't feel she could care for Kath effectively anymore, so she decided to place her in a care home. But often that transition, you know, for a person with dementia who's finds it very difficult to adapt to new situations, that transition into a care home environment is extremely distressing. So Kath was all of a sudden surrounded by these strangers. She was in a very unfamiliar environment with no connection to her past, and she became confused and disorientated. She was constantly in distress, and most importantly, she felt abandoned by family. You know, family that had been there to support her all along had suddenly decided that they could no longer do that. So she was, she found it really tough. In addition to the personal and emotional impacts on the person with dementia, actually placing somebody in a care home is incredibly expensive. So we're looking at about £1,500 a week just to provide care for that person within a residential care setting. So there's a real need to provide better support for family carers so that people with dementia can continue living at home for longer, which is often where they want to be. And that's really where our wearable technologies come in with what we're doing at Mcmaster. So there are two parts to this talk. I'm going to focus initially a bit about the research that I did at the Bristol Robotics Laboratory. And then I'm going to talk about the journey around the commercialization and where we're currently at. I know it's supposed to be a 30-minute presentation. I might finish slightly sooner, but if that's the case, then maybe we can have another coffee break, who knows. So I won't dwell on this. I know Stuart did touch on it, but dementia is a massive global challenge, hugely expensive. If we look at the worldwide cost, it's equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of Australia. They're really, really significant and reaches right across the globe. Pretty much any developed nation and a lot of developing nations are really going to struggle with the growth in dementia over the next 20 to 30 years and the costs attached to that. So we need to do something now. My research focused on the sort of technological aspect around specifically behavioral symptoms of dementia. So looking at whether we could use wearable devices, machine learning and robotics to provide some level of support for family carers in the community that would hopefully help to minimize the impact of distress and agitation. And there was quite a large qualitative element to the research. So I was working with St. Monica Trust in Bristol, which is a large care charity. And as a result of that, I was able to speak to their care team, really understand some of the challenges that they faced, and also crucially, identify any issues and challenges around wearable devices and technology generally, because we certainly hear that the care sector is quite far behind with technology. There's not people generally aren't that confident and willing to embrace it. So it was really important that we uncovered any issues at an early stage in the research. There was also an experimental part of the research, so fitting healthy people with various different wearable devices, putting them through the kinds of situations that would typically trigger a person with dementia to become distressed and agitated. So we're talking pain, anxiety, frustration. So, you know, that kind of cognitive effort, the person's thinking about something, they can't quite articulate what it is that they need. We're trying to induce those sorts of responses in healthy people and looking at how the physiology then changed in response to that. And then the final bit of the research was developing the technology around those findings and hopefully validating it in a relevant setting. So the BRL is a great place to do this kind of research. We have various different themes, research themes focused on robotics. It's actually the largest multidisciplinary robotics research facility in the UK. Some of the themes include autonomous vehicles. So we've got a garage with all these really cool, fancy vehicles in there. It might be of interest to some of you on the call. A lot of stuff with UAVs as well. And there's a big flying studio where they can do all sorts of experiments with drones. Medical robotics is a big area. There's a machine vision institute located within the BRL as well. And also robotic touch. So looking at how robots can potentially experience the world through haptic sensation, which is obviously quite an exciting area. But the area and the theme that I was situated within is called the assisted living theme. And it's primarily looking at how robotics and assistive technologies can support people that have disabilities or that are a little bit older in age to continue living independently. So it sits really well with also what we're doing with Mcmaster. I've included on the slide a picture of the assisted living studio. So this is set up like somebody's house, but it's a real showcase for all the innovative technologies that are currently being developed and deployed around assisted living. And we also have quite a few robots, so mainly socially assistive robots. A few of you might be familiar with Pepper. That's had quite a lot of exposure. Certainly in Japan, it's everywhere. We've also got the Thiago Platform. So this is something I was using in European robotics competitions. I was taking this out to Barcelona and various different countries and doing things like getting it to clean a toilet, quite funnily. Also, there's the Now, which is a much smaller platform, but designed to engage people. Really, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's a bit like a toy, but it's quite nice as a teaching tool and as an engagement tool for getting robotics out there. I won't dwell anymore on the different platforms that we have. It's slightly less exciting. So this is the Health Tech Hub at UWE, and I use this facility to conduct one of my experiments. It's almost like an extension of the assisted living studio at the BRL. So this actually has a bed, it has showering facilities and everything, but again, it has the sensor instrumentation in there to be able to collect data, which was really important for what we were doing. And I also had a placement in Japan at Osaka University. And this is one of the professors that's over there. He's often in the news. He's quite an odd fellow. So he's created a robot, an android, that looks exactly like he does. And if you search for him online, then you will find, you know, him and this android together in conversation. So very, very bizarre. Some of his other areas of interest are creating very beautiful female androids. Not sure what purpose that serves. And also looking at robotic babies. So he has some really strange interests, but it was great to be at the cutting edge of robotics research and everything that's going on in Japan. So back to the sort of practical side of my research. There were really three key findings that we took forward. So the first is that care workers working within residential care facilities would benefit very much from an agitation early warning system. So some sort of early warning that somebody is becoming distressed and might ultimately become behaviorally symptomatic. So I've included a few quotes here from care workers that I was speaking to through the qualitative part of the research, essentially articulating that need and desire for an early warning system. We also showed that stress is a trigger for these sorts of behaviours. So stress of the kind that includes, you know, pain, very prevalent within the research field. It's known about. People with dementia are often undertreated for pain, and this results in agitation and aggression. But it's very difficult for a carer to provide pain relief because the person with dementia isn't able to express that they're in pain. So, you know, there's an opportunity here to use a wearable device to detect that. I've included on the left basically a model of emotion called the circumplex model. And there are two axes. So the first is arousal. This is really the extent of the emotional response that the person is feeling. There's also the valence axis, which is, you know, is that person positively or negatively emotional? You know, is it a stress response or is it a eustress response? And you'll see that there are some pictures on the right. So one of me looking very silly. What I was doing there was trying to collect data that was at both sides of the valence axis through the experiment. So we had an interaction with a robotic pet called Myro, where people were stroking it and engaging with it. It was all really positive and relaxing. We also had something called a cold pressor test, which is a standard way of eliciting pain in experimental participants. So the person has to submerge one of their hands in an ice cold bucket of water for 3 minutes, and it's actually quite painful. So really trying to cover the whole spectrum of stressful experiences that a person with dementia might encounter. The third finding was that a lot of the existing wearables that are on the market are quite problematic for people with dementia. They often cause distress. So people with dementia are very sensitive to sort of unfamiliar things. And, you know, something on the wrist that a person's not used to wearing and that is unfamiliar will be removed. Through my qualitative research again, I heard stories about wearable devices being flushed down the toilet, being thrown out of the window. Various things do happen to them. So it's really important that we develop a form factor that's acceptable for a person with dementia and that they're not going to find stigmatizing and they're not going to want to take off. So a really important finding there. And this is really where I got to with the research. So it was the development of a proof of concept using smart socks. So socks came about through, again, discussing with care workers the kind of form factor that would probably work best for a person with dementia, but also bearing in mind the key objective, which was detecting those signs, early signs of distress. And actually the foot is a really good location for measuring skin conductance response, which is very indicative of the arousal axis of the circumplex model. So we took the socks through 4 design iterations. I think Stuart mentioned that an ankle tag is something that's probably not so suitable for a person with dementia, and that's indeed what we found. A lot of the family members, as soon as they saw it, they said, this is not something I would want my relative to wear. So we actually went a little bit beyond that and integrated the electronics into the sock in a very basic and rudimentary way. Ran some experiments with healthy people, and we are around 70% accurate at detecting these signs of distress. So clearly quite promising result. So I rushed through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the commercialization now and really where we're at. So this is the journey. And I was very fortunate when I was writing up my PhD thesis, I was accepted onto a deep tech accelerator program called Conception X. And the idea of this is that it takes PhD students and delivers them a crash course in how to run a startup and how to actually get going. So this accelerated my journey. It gave me a really good foundation to build upon. A little bit later, I had my Viva, so I completed the PhD, but I was already working on Millbotics and really trying to develop the value proposition. Shortly after that, we received some very small amount of grant funding, which was very helpful. And then things really started to pick up pace. So we received some more grant funding, we received our investment from Alzheimer's Society, and actually we just put out a press release which has gone global. There's a huge amount of interest in what we're doing and really clear recognition that this is an unmet need that we're serving. So very exciting times for us. I did struggle at the beginning of the research. So coming from an engineering background, I was used to having a very clearly defined problem and developing a solution that addressed that. But with research, it's almost flipped the other way around. So you're essentially seeking a problem that's in need of a solution. It's a really weird mindset shift, but I did eventually manage to adapt to that change in mindset, which was really a bit of a milestone moment for me. But then I had to go through that all again with when I started Millbotics. And what I found is that I kept plugging the amazing results that we'd collected with regards to the technology and saying, look, this is the opportunity here. This is how effective and how accurate we are at recognizing these signs of stress. And investors were saying, well, that's great, but what does it mean? Can you build a business around it? Is there a real need for this product? And that's something that I didn't have an answer for. And eventually learned the hard way that I really needed to build out the full proposition if we were going to raise investment. So we're very lucky to have a really well-balanced team. Myself still leading the technology, but hoping to pass that over to somebody who's better able to do that. But we've also got Jackie Arnold, who is a social care expert. So she really understands the market. She understands the need, and she's a real champion for what we're doing. And also Peter, who's got a wealth of business experience as a serial entrepreneur. And research is really important to what we're doing. So we need to build a base of evidence, essentially, that we can use to demonstrate the benefits of the product. So research is really critical to what we're doing. There we go. A bit about the product. So we are very much focused on the recognition of distress. We want to provide an early preemptive alert that somebody could become agitated so that a member of the care team can intervene earlier before the behavior escalates and becomes unmanageable. And this also, drawing on my experience with my great-grandmother, has really important applications in the community. We want to try and delay admissions to care homes, and I think this is going to provide a massive benefit for people. There are other areas where we can help as well. So if we detect the signs of distress, and we can access data, passive data collected from sensors in the environment, then we can start to recognize what the sources of that distress might be and actually help to prevent any escalations in behavior from even occurring in the first place. And what's also really important is that we provide some objective measure of changes in agitation over time, because oftentimes the way that agitation is treated is through pharmacology, through medications. And these can have some really severe side effects, including increased mortality risk. So it's important that the benefits of those medications offset the risks, and that's something that we want to be able to demonstrate with our technology. In terms of the roadmap, so the proof of concept was delivered as part of the research, not really suitable for use by a person with dementia. It's very much a research-focused thing. We are a couple of months away from delivering our prototype, and we've got several care homes lined up waiting to use this. They're really eager to get their hands on it and put it through its paces. Early next year, or early to mid next year, we are planning to release our consumer product, which won't have a great body of evidence around it, but it's something we can hopefully demonstrate traction with investors, and will ultimately lead then to the medical device, which is on a much longer time frame, but we've applied for funding from the National Institute for Health Research to be able to make that happen. This is the current prototype. So we're actually using a printed technology called Elastotrode, which is from a company called Conductive Transfers. It has some limitations. So there are some real challenges around socks. Simon might tell you. And actually, applications in care homes are especially challenging because if an item of clothing is very heavily soiled, it will be thrown in the wash at 70 degrees C, which is certainly challenges for a lot of the smart textile materials that are out there. Also really important that we ensure high levels of comfort. So I'm very interested in having a discussion with Simon to see if there might be an opportunity to work together. A bit about some of our partnerships. Alzheimer's Society is obviously a key partner and a stamp of approval for what we're doing. I've said also that we're very involved in research, and actually we have quite a few research partners that we are working with to develop the tech. Initially focused on residential and nursing care. I think it's advantageous in a way because it's easier to develop a product that's going to be used in quite a self-contained setting. But we recognise that there's a need for this product, not just serving people with dementia, but also other people that have complex needs, including autism and learning disabilities. So we are looking at how we can develop the technology and deploy it into the community. We have networked very widely, and there's been a huge amount of interest in what we're doing, covering all 3 market segments. So, you know, we're really motoring along. We've got a lot of momentum behind us. And I did mention the press release, and this was actually, it was unexpected, the amount of interest that we've had, and really clear recognition of the value of socks. So, you know, for some people with dementia, socks are the only thing that they will wear reliably and comfortably and consistently. And similarly, interest in being involved in the research and helping to shape it. And that's so important with these kind of technologies, that we get the input of end users and stakeholders throughout the usage chain to be able to ensure that we're covering all the bases with what we're doing. The final part of the presentation is an ask, basically. So we need help. If you can assist us with any introductions, probably most relevant on this call is in regards to supply chain partners around e-textiles and Internet of Things. Please do get in touch. My email address is on the slide. Yeah, thank you so much, and look forward to the Q&A session later.
Really good. Thank you very much, Zeke. Very, very interesting. Quite interesting to learn today that obviously socks are the future. Who knew?
I know.
Quite good.
Messages out.
Stuart, maybe you should have a look to see if you can fit yours to socks somehow or something. Excellent stuff. Not really sure from a technology point of view how we now switch on to our next presenters. Can you assist?
Of course. So we've got Laura and Gopika on the call. So if you want to take over and start sharing your screen, we'll make sure that you're both visible. There we go.
That's made me feel really old that I need to get somebody else in to sort out the technology, but there we are. Excellent. So we now hand over to Laura and Gopika, also talking about smart textiles, possibly about socks as well. So let's find out. Over to you both. Can you all hear and see us and things all right?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, and we can see you.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks.
So, hello everyone. My name is Laura. I'm the founder and CEO of Nitrogen, which is a wearable medtech company developing patent pending smart textiles components, specifically the power bead that you can see on screen here, which provides a novel method for modifying muscle performance, specifically to support stroke survivors to regain lost movement. I'm going to be presenting alongside Dr. Gopika Rajan today. Over to you, Gopika.
I just graduated from the University of Exeter with a PhD in textile fiber sensors, and I'm going to be working with Laura on the power bead. I'm going to be joining a very strong level of cross-sector expertise at the Royal College of Art, the Imperial College of London. We have advisors in Newcastle, Leeds, Preston, Bristol, and Southampton. In addition, we also have several charities partnering with us.
So let's put this into context. Currently, there's around 87,000 new cases of stroke that emerge each year in the UK alone. And this figure is set to triple in the next 15 years. So whilst survival rates are increasing due to clinical advancements, particularly in the early stages post-stroke, actually a staggering 50% of survivors are deemed the non-recoverers. They don't recover according to proportional recovery standards. And they're left with moderate to severe levels of disability. They lose their job. They're left dependent on long-term daily support. And this currently costs the UK economy around £8.5 billion per year in health and social care costs. Now on screen, you can see one of our participants. She's kindly allowed me to share the picture with you today, and she's been with us with the research for the past 3 years. She's 7 years post-stroke at the moment, with limited arm and finger extension, persistent stiffness and pain, but she's an example of one of the better cases.
The survivors become completely dependent on others to help with simple exercises at home or even simple everyday tasks. Their behavior also changes over time. I've noticed that they become really easily irritated, annoyed, depressed, and it gets really difficult to take care of them. It comes to a point where they don't simply want to live anymore. They are done. It also gets really difficult to it also gets quite difficult for them to be transported to the physiotherapist or the treatment centers on a daily basis for treatment. This can get even more difficult if the patient is, let's say, obese or has an additional form of disability. For example, someone with existing mobility issues. It takes more than one person to help them in these situations. Let's say we get there somehow. At the treatment center, they are asked to use equipment which is probably quite unfamiliar to them, and it can get really scary. In some cases, the treatment is just abandoned by the patients or the survivors due to several difficulties, meaning they would never recover. That is why I'm going to take a minute to speak about the limitations with the current technology. The current methods are only effective to a certain extent, and they often they are quite undignified actually. Survivors are lucky to see a therapist twice a year in places where there is a national shortage. The treatment takes time and dedication, making it really difficult to live a normal life. A significant moment in the research so far was when a patient said, I don't have a life outside the rehab. I just want to live. I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. In the case of moderate to more severe levels of disability, the treatment for regaining movement is often unavailable, and the survivors are instead taught to just simply accept their plight and live with their impairments. But is there a way this can change?
So we've been developing the power bead, which is seen on the screen here. This is one bead with sensors that can be discreetly integrated into everyday clothing. It delivers timed impulses or short forces to modify muscle responses, and particularly to modify neural responses to a prominent neural pathway that dominates the control of the upper limb. The importance of this is to make it available to patients on a daily basis. And embedding this within what you can see on screen here, one of our prototype garments. So we've been working with people in the community to understand what this looks like, the importance of the garment as well. And just to place this into perspective, when we were conducting the research, we had an overwhelming response to say, well, current assistive tech wearable aids, as has been the sort of the story throughout this conference today, are just they can attract stigma, and they can attract unwanted questioning, more importantly, from both their peers who have equally had a brain injury or similar situations, but also attract unwanted looks as well. And actually, the unwanted questioning means that they have to relive stories over and over again. And when they want to just simply move on and get on with life, then that becomes quite troublesome. So how can we embed this into something which is familiar, universally understood, and therefore easy to use and implement, and indeed comfortable and desirable? So we've been developing garments here that can be looser fitting as well as tighter fitting to embed the power bead in. And indeed looking to work with a range of, say, key fashion and sports brands to embed within existing clothing. So unlike other methods, we're actually able to activate or suppress muscle activity through the power bead itself. Now, this is really important because post-stroke, what we can see is that muscles can be selectively strengthened and also selectively weakened. And a lot of emphasis is actually placed on strengthening those weaker muscles, but there's still a barrier there. There's still a barrier of those groups of muscles which are overactive. And that can result in, say, a closed hand, curved arm, and meaning that those individuals cannot access other levels of treatment. So we must stress here as well that we're not looking to replace current rehabilitation. We're looking to boost recovery and provide additional support to what is currently offered, and indeed bridge the gap between those 50% not having access to any rehabilitation necessarily, to them then being able to access further rehabilitation. So to date, we're very pleased to say that we've demonstrated that the bead works in every participant that we've tested so far. But what's the inspiration behind what we're doing here? Well, you'll see a very funny photo on screen. That's myself with Professor Stuart Baker from Newcastle University. We've been working with him over the past couple of years. And indeed, the underlying neuroscience really comes from the Baker lab, so from Professor Baker himself. In studies that he was exploring with TMS, so the equipment that you see placed on top of my head is a TMS machine, that's a transcranial magnetic stimulation machine. They identified that the starting up sound of the machine itself, which produces a click, also has an impact on action potentials and essentially contributes towards the excitation or inhibition of a synaptic pathway, as well as what the machine does itself. So this was quite a unexpected finding. And actually, what the team found there was that the key timing of the stimuli could be arranged so that you could either excite or inhibit neural responses to areas of the body. Well, this is all well and good, but accessing a TMS machine, accessing equipment which could deliver this was very, very large pieces of clinical equipment or equipment that requires a trained professional to operate, is just not useful to the population, especially when you need to have a level of contact with the technology that is 4 hours per day over, say, a 6-month period of time. And that's really dependent on a case-by-case basis as to, you know, how the individual has experienced stroke. So this is where we came in, and partnering with Professor Baker, we identified that we could reduce this down significantly to the very small bead that you could see on screen previously. And not only that, but increase the precision and safety of treatment. So someone might ask, well, is this electrical stimulation? No, it's not. We're working with mechanical stimulation here. So something which can be delivered and waterproofed and integrated into the garment itself. So our technology is really targeting these gaps, enabling individuals to access and position the treatment alongside everyday life. Now, our methods of development include electrospinning polymer fibers that you can see on screen here, as well as melt spinning, mold making, and 3D printing. But a real critical part of our developments includes working with key stakeholders. We've been doing this before the power bead was developed, and we've been doing this at key stages throughout the work. So handing over small samples of textiles for them to be able to handle, hold, manipulate, imagine what that would look and feel like on their bodies. We do this with stroke survivors, carers, support workers, physiotherapists, and occupational therapists. And just this week, we've been doing this with our latest prototype at a major London hospital after being invited to demo the tech there. This is an example of one of our other workshops that we've been conducting so far, testing textile switches. So yes, the power bead is our core technology, but this requires a level of control. How does the individual, how does the wearer control the technology? And what does that correspondence look like between the tech and the wearer? Often requires real consideration. So we've been working again with small samples and then scaling up to the sample garments that you can see participants wearing on screen here. Understanding what types of gestures that they would like to perform with the garment in order to switch the technology on and off. Where is that positioned? So does that look unusual to someone else? Would they want to turn that on and perform that gesture in both public and private scenarios? We're also keen to explore as well with them the desirability of the garment and the technology, both not just when the technology is on, but when it is turned off. So to promote this additional want to wear something, how do we embed this within the garment that we're developing here? And that's forming a really crucial part of our research to date. We've been working with methods, therefore, from garment and textile technology, such as on the left, you can see an example of a body scan. We're using this to detect changes in posture, which often occur as a result of stroke. So, for example, dropped shoulder, the limited movement that occurs, meaning that we're able to map this and create our own size charts, because quite frankly, using size charts that exist in fashion within the fashion industry just aren't necessarily the most suitable thing for us to do. Why, you might ask? Well, from our research, individuals, depending on the garment composition, the yarn type, the textile structure itself, and the fit, this can all impact the way that the individual can or cannot wear a particular garment. So for example, a sleeve might consistently fall off the shoulder. Now having to readjust that might be quite simple for us, but for one, it's annoying, and two, it takes energy, and actually post-stroke fatigue can be really overwhelming. So that can be the difference between someone wearing a garment and someone not. So we're using this technology to inform our developments, to predict and analyze the fit of the garment. And on the right, you see a visualization of the garment from a digital knit software, showing points of contact with the body, and we're able to then obviously translate our avatars that we're scanning in the body scanning software into the digital knit software itself, and understand exactly what the behavior of the garment looks like prior to sampling. Now, we can only do this with a limited amount of a limited element, so we can't look at everything. We do still need to make the garment itself and test it, but that will enable us to make small tweaks and identify any issues prior to using precious resource.
Now, in addition to delivering the stimulation using the power bead, we've also been exploring how the wearer or the end user can trust and understand what's happening as a result of receiving the treatment and have a certain level of transparency between their recovery and the function of the power bead. Basically, they just want to understand what the technology is doing. This is mainly because the treatment provides long-term changes over time, and instant results are not seen immediately in the arm function. So knowing that something is happening is therefore important to the survivor's compliance with the device. As a result, we display the data, the muscle data on the app. This information would enable the patient to track their recovery. We've also been thinking about how the app may be utilized by a family member or a carer or a support worker, and how we can make this easy and efficient to use alongside quite busy lifestyles. Next slide, please, Laura. Thank you. So earlier today, we had Simon speak about the washability of a tech device, and we this is something we completely understand, and the importance of washability in a textile-based product is something quite essential to the aftercare the tech device. For the demographic that are the end users of our technology, disassembly of small parts for washing the garment can be quite difficult, and this can lead to device abandonment, which is something which is one of the problems with wearable tech. Therefore, we're exploring the possibility of waterproofing, having some sort of thermal and chemical insulation of component parts in order to enable the technology to be treated as an everyday object or simply an everyday garment. Some prior work I've undertaken at the University of Exeter included a series of washing and bending tests of conductive textile fibers. On the left, you see the results from washing tests of graphene-coated textile fibers, and on the right, an example of bending tests conducted on the same fibers. In order to emulate the washing machine, we tested different parameters, which is very different parameters, such as washing temperature, the type of detergent used, the spinning speed, and these washing tests were done simply in a beaker with a magnetic stirrer. The bending tests involved bending the textile fiber at a fixed diameter for up to 1,000 cycles. It was found that there was no significant change in the conductivity of the samples after subjecting the textile fibers to washing and bending tests. Now, this has inspired us to look further into the aftercare of the power bead. Now, this is something we are quite interested to speak about. So we are quite open to conversation with people who have experience in, for example, testing the durability of a product, of a wearable tech product, and keeping the e-waste to a minimum. This slide shows the milestones we are currently working towards, including completing our electrophysiology testing and transferring the prototype development to manufacture. So please, if you have any further questions or would like to just simply have a chat with us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Please contact Laura. A quick thanks to Dr. Flore and Dr. Nevish for their everlasting support. So please join us in reimagining muscle training and recovery and give the stroke survivors their lives back. Thank you for listening.
Right, really good. Thank you very much. Fascinating presentation. We'll move on to the Q&A session now. So if I can invite Simon and Stuart to take a seat, and then hopefully, well, it's on speaker thing, right? So we'll only see people when they talk, I'm guessing. So really what I would like to do now is invite questions from the audience, either in the room or obviously at home. So does anybody have any questions? Here we go.
Just interested in the dementia angle from the treatment point of view. So myself and my wife, we care for my mother-in-law who has dementia. We care for her every Saturday. Have done for the last 2 years. She was diagnosed late 60s with Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. So one of the biggest challenges we have found is the denial piece. The inability to want to come to terms with the fact that they've got the condition in the first place. That causes a lot of discomfort, a lot of issues. Anything to do with discussing it becomes a problem. So I guess my question is, how do we try and work on the benefits of the information from a treatment viewpoint for the care of the person versus the reluctance to want to engage in terms of thinking about the potential cost of not engaging, for example, increased use of emergency service, etc. I don't know what your thoughts on that. Denial for me is a big part of Alzheimer's and dementia. I'm just interested in your thoughts.
That's a tough one. I might defer to Sequin, the panel on there. All I can say is from my personal experience and my understanding is that, and my conversations with my parents, is that I try to focus on there's a lot of stigma in the UK around mental health, around dementia, and moving that is definitely is a task. I think that with my father, I talk a lot about wanting him to continue to enjoy his life, and that we talk about the Alzheimer's Society talk about safer walking, rather than talking about you know, the negative connotations of it. So you know, when we came to a tracker, I said, look, it's going to allow you to walk safely. And if you need anything, I'm right here for you. So, so we didn't talk about dementia per se. It just talks about him maintaining the quality of his life. And I think there's a lot of fear. You know, people know that that age is not things don't get better with time. I think there's that deep-seated fear that you're going to end up somewhere where you really don't want to be. So we don't go there, frankly. I'm sorry, that sort of sounds like that's my personal experience.
It's interesting to talk about the again trying to find solutions. I think that's the piece. We almost have to not went to the D word or the A word in any way, shape, or form. It took 2 years to get diagnosis because she didn't want to go to the doctor. That was the problem.
I'm going to defer to Zeke on that. I'm sure it's got some views. So,
Yeah, Zeke or Laura or Kopika, any thoughts from your end?
I think it's a really great point, and I think Stuart's answered it quite well. Essentially, two elements. I mean, the messaging is really important, getting that messaging right. We're not developing a product for people with dementia that need some additional support, and it's going to, you know, it's all about how you, communicate the benefits without necessarily stigmatizing people. And I think the other part is around the design. So finding some sort of design that people can adopt relatively easily without feeling stigmatized, without feeling that people are looking at them in a certain way and that's marking them out as different. Obviously really important. But fundamentally, it all comes down to what is the design process that you have in place. Really important that you are human-centered and that you're engaging with people that are going to be using the product throughout the development process, because that's the way that you can find these sorts of issues.
Laura or Kopika, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we come from an inclusive design research centre, so we're based in that. So it's almost, yeah, this is our bread and butter as well. That essentially it's really important to have those unheard voices really at the fore, and not just as a developer say and prescribe this is exactly what you need and try and force it upon someone. It's actually they're the experts in their lived experience at the end of the day, and neglecting that is I think a real downfall for any developer, really. Yeah, and I would say that actually generally, if we look back at how the term, say, normal has emerged in society and what we term as being normal and what we term as being stigmatizing, it's really interesting to see that this has developed over some time, you know, as a result of, say, the state wanting to just monitor and understand statistically what is happening within the continent itself. And people have been neglected or sort of placed within a separate space, you know, from society. And we often sort of talk about this as being, well, how do we help to integrate? Well, shouldn't we be looking at, rather than the person themselves changing, it's society that really needs to change as well, and educating society on those elements that, well, looking at someone and saying, why are you wearing that? What is that wearable device? Where has that come from? And where have we learned that from? So from my perspective, I think that's an equally important thing to consider.
I think there are obvious benefits, I guess, is the point of society. So I think a particular incident, my mother-in-law left the place that she's in, a retirement home, at early hours of the morning, was walking down the road, which was quite distressing. Now, but to try and get to engage with some kids in any way, shape or form that would have anything to do with that is really difficult. But arguably, and I'm going to be blunt, Leicestershire Police might take a very different view. I guess that piece is that if there's obvious benefits from the safety view, that's an ethical nightmare in terms of trying to get the engagement with people who aren't engaged. And what do we do? You know, a bit like a lot of smokers. Smokers know what they should do. A lot of people don't want to do it because they're quite happy to do the smoking. It's that piece, that discussion of what we do. I think that's even piece about some of the positive steps. It's personal experience, it's a hell of a battle. Yeah.
Very tricky indeed. You had a question as well?
So I think first, thanks to all the speakers, and I never really thought of wearables as including textiles, which seems a bit ridiculous when you think about everything we wear made of textiles, like you said. But one of the things that I didn't quite understand with the textile sensors and the small other wearable things we talked about today, how do you get the data from the garment to the app or software that displays it? Is it something you have to regularly plug in, or is it wirelessly? How does that work for you all?
You just, so for us, you just literally put it, there's a little piece of electronics goes in that pocket.
Okay.
And it goes Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. At the moment, it just gets into your computer, but you can go anywhere you want. Yeah. Okay. So you do. So when I say there are no electronics in it, there aren't. There's no sensors in there, apart from the textile itself. But we still need a piece here or wherever it might be to try and do it. So shoes, same thing. Yeah. So that's how you get it off.
So when it's like a care environment, I guess someone has to come in every now and again, just tap the sensor, and that's as streamlined as possible. Is that how it works?
Well, for the rehabilitation and stuff, if I go back to the previous point that was made, so one of the things about making what they call wearables, I don't wear a watch, bits and pieces and stuff, is you get a digital overload. You get all of this information. You don't need it. Okay. If you need to find mother-in-law, you need to know where she is. Okay. That's the only thing you need to know. All of these things tell you things that are just a waste of time and money. Okay. You need to make it as simple as is humanly possible. And the reason textiles are the best thing for it, like I said, mate, unless something's gone really badly wrong, you don't go outside naked. If I hide it in your shoes and you don't even know it's there, I still know where to find you. I still know how. Do you know what I mean? It's a when you understand how much you interact with textiles. So, quick story: chemist by background. Never ever thought I'd do knitting, mate. Ever in a billion years. All right. Had to read books on knitting for 10 years to get it to work. But once you see how much you interact with them, then it's just a no-brainer to try and put it in there. To take this thing away where you have to wear a Fitbit, or you have to wear a blood pressure monitor, or any of those things, just put them in your clothes. And if you need to do it, you do it. If you don't need to do it, you don't. It's really simple. Yeah. It's incredibly simple. It's quite hard to get through to certain people in various organisations, but it is quite simple, I think. Yeah.
But it does seem a theme, because Stuart, you deliberately set out to make yours very, very simple as well, so that it's easy for people to take along. Because if you, as you said, if you tie it to his walking stick, he takes his walking stick and it's done. So there's no, you don't have to tell him to do it. You don't have to make special arrangements in that regard. And like you said, if you stick it in a shoe, so like, yeah, just wear your shoes, man, and he's off.
And where you keep your shoes with a mat, you just inductively charge it. Doesn't even have to think about doing that. You just stick it in. Go, Dad, Granddad, stick your shoes down there. Oh, really? Nice new mat. See links? Just stick them on there, mate.
Yeah.
And you're done.
Yeah. Laura, do you want to come in on this maybe as well? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of the challenges that we've faced that we're looking at the moment is that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, there's an element of trust and transparency as well with the individual. So making things simple and easy, absolutely, completely advocate for that. But at the same time, there's a need for understanding the psychological implication of, well, I'm wearing something like this. What is it doing? How do I know that my data is private? How do I know that it's doing what it is meant to be doing and it's not harming me in any way? We know what's happening, but how do we convey that to other people? How do we convey that to the wearer? And that for us is why we have been developing, this visualization of the data. Completely agree with Simon. We don't need to know all of this information. We've just been filtering it and saying, well, let's just ask the individuals themselves. Let's ask the stroke survivor. Let's ask the family member. Let's ask the clinician. What exactly do you want to know about your recovery? What is the essential core information? By asking that, you're then able to know, okay, how we can extract the data, how we can, what are we choosing from that? We're not choosing it ourselves as the developer, and then deliver that through the companion app. So, but still, I think just data, I mean, because we're a medical device, data privacy is something that we have to be really hot on anyway. But that level of transparency as well just really came through in leaps and bounds within our research early on. We can't just offer them a power bead. They have to know exactly what's happening.
One of the other things I'd add to that is, so I do, like, I've got another smallish business on the side which does exactly the same thing stuff as this wearable technology, but you actually don't need to show, so the transparency about the data I agree with. Like, we live in a society where you have to know what's going on, and most of the, a lot of the internet companies that say, no, I won't do this, and I won't do that with your thing, just lie, and they do. So one of the things that I always think about and stuff is, why does the patient, in certain cases, I'm not saying this is relevant to everything, but why does the patient need to see the data? So what we're doing with the shoes is I turn it into art. That's all I do. So they don't get the data, they get a nice piece of artwork at the end of the week. And the nice piece of artwork at the end of the week told them that they've moved enough, they've done this, they've done that. Okay? I don't care how many steps you take. Doesn't bother me. I just like you to, Granny, I just like to see out wandering. And if Grandma has granddaughter going, oh, Grandma, what's the artwork you've done this week from your walking? That's the most powerful emotional way to get somebody to do something. So I'm not saying that that sort of thing can be used in every healthcare application, but it can be used in a lot. You know, it's incredibly powerful for, like, either visual or auditory. Somebody, Zeke said, is your great grandma liked jazz, I think it was. Okay, so same thing. So with great grandma, I'd get her out walking in her shoes and get it to play her favourite jazz thing when she got back. I wouldn't get it to do anything else. It's just, you know, we think that technology always has to give me a graph or data. It doesn't. It just has to give you an emotional response that makes you keep doing the same thing again, that's making you better.
And I think the positive reinforcement message that we saw in Kopika's slide, where it's like, hey, you're doing great, buddy. You know, you've done your exercises or whatever it is. That's probably far more powerful than here's a graph about all the stuff you did.
Yeah.
Because people will then go, well, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Or somebody's been out for, you know, you've been out for a walk, Dad or Granddad and stuff. You've been out for a wander, or your mum been out for a wander. Oh, it looks like you had a great walk. You're back now. You know, don't say, oh, I know, you know that they're back, but just go to them. Fantastic. How was it? It's an emotional response. It's not. We are far too driven by using. There's some very clever people on stuff and around here and stuff, by using data to keep telling people things. And to a certain extent, they don't care. They just want to be a better version of themselves.
I completely agree, but I also feel that there are categories of people. So there are pockets of people that we've worked with who they will read journal articles, they will research till the day is gone because they want to know every fine detail. They will ask the doctor, their physiotherapist, what does this term mean? What they want to know, fine details. So actually, what we're working on is how do we balance that? So you will have people who just have that, okay, I just need to know very simply, am I doing well or not? What's happening? Very, very simply. And visualizing that in the ways that you've described, Simon, I think is really clever and important to take on board. But at the same time, we also have those people who they want to know the nitty-gritty. So how do you balance that within visualizing data?
Presumably, there's customizable dashboards. You know, if you have super sports nerds like Djokovic, he would want to know everything, you know, to ridiculous degrees. And, you know, if it's your granddad going for a walk, he doesn't care. He just wants to go, you know, did you have a nice walk type thing. So presumably that goes into software and user experience customization to try and achieve that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
By the way, Zeke, do you want to come in on this? I'm conscious that you
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd say there's probably another facet which is around how we actually integrate this data with other data that's lying around within the environment, because that does present an incredible opportunity. You know, if you've got a sensor that somebody's wearing, you've perhaps got some passive monitoring sensors, you can build a much bigger picture and identify maybe new insights that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And I'd say that one of the challenges that we face as innovators in this area is that there isn't really a standard way of sharing data, of communicating, you know, data schemas that can be utilized in a consistent way. We don't have that at this point. So we're all essentially implementing our own solutions, and that is, as a result, limiting what we can do with the data that we're actually collecting. So I think that's something that really needs to move along.
Very interesting.
Sorry, just say something. I think one of the benefits of the simplicity that you've all talked about is that it puts the need as the main driver of the activity. Whereas, you know, from personal experience, I had a Fitbit a while ago, and I found myself worrying about how many flights of stairs I went every day, just because it counted it. And actually, it doesn't matter. What mattered was exercise. But because if you've got a complex gadget that tells you something, you start worrying about the thing that it's telling you without, and that becomes a driver for your behaviour, not the outcome, which is, you know, going outside to get to exercise or whatever. So yeah, just agreeing with what you're saying.
It is about the behaviour. I understand what I think Laura said about the people who are really interested in stuff, but my counter argument to that would be they won't be a big part of your market. I don't think. I could be incredibly wrong, absolutely, but I don't think they'll be a big part of your market. And Joe Public just wants to be a better version of themselves. That's all it is. And I think that thing that was said about the Zeke said about the data and everybody implementing the different stuff, I think is a really valid point. Like, if we want to make society better, somebody has to go, this is the thing that you use, and you all use it. Don't care who else is in there and stuff, and it runs properly and it works properly, and you all use it. And everyone goes, oh, you can't do that. It has to be, excuse my language, bollocks. You can do it because they need to. You need to all have a system that you can drop stuff into that everybody can access, and that it's incredibly safe and stuff in bits and pieces. Because we all try and start our own companies, I'm exactly the same. You're all trying to start your company, you're all trying to make some money, you're all trying to do that and stuff. The outcome of this is not me getting wealthy. The outcome of this is making society a better place. It's got nothing to do with, you know, yes, I have to earn a living, but I do all right at that.
Yeah, but from it should effectively be almost like an open source solution from the data point of view, so that we can all benefit from it.
Internet was an open source thing which helped us start all of this stuff. So, you know, why can't we just, you know, stop being really green?
I think because somebody wants to make some money out of it.
Yeah, but there's some quite wealthy companies out there.
Sure. So no, I completely agree with you, but I think that's part of the problem. Any other questions from anybody, Richard? And then
One of the interesting things I've taken about this is there isn't a single source of data, and there isn't a single destination of information. There's a journey that goes from, in your case, the resistance of your sensors in there, which is a resistance measurement. Then gets processed into a certain level of data, which gets into a pulse, which gets into a step, which gets into a movement. And as you say, that's not of any relevance to your end user. But actually, there are people on the way who actually are interested in how many counts there are. So there is actually more than one customer of that information. And so as you process that data more, then maybe your physician or your care worker needs to know a different destination of information than what your actual end wearer is, which probably just needs a warm and fuzzy feeling to say, yes, I'm doing well. But actually, there are people on the way on that journey that actually say, well, actually, I do care how many steps they're doing. And a different, if you go back to your Fitbit, where it's telling you how many steps you're counting, when you measure and give that information to people, that data affects them. As you say, you suddenly start looking for stairs to go up, which is a positive thing. The Fitbits are there to make you fitter. You finding more stairs means you find more stairs to go up. You become fitter. It's achieving its goal. It's a different destination to where the sock is, which is just actually a case of actually, are they just achieving the goal? Yeah.
If I could jump in, so I think this really relates to the point I made about the design process, identifying who the stakeholders are, who's going to be involved in deploying this technology is absolutely critical to do at the beginning of the development. And there are standard tools to do this. So there's, I don't know what you call it, but it looks like a bullseye. And you've got the user in the center, and you've got everybody around them that's involved in delivering and deploying that technology within the sort of outer rings of the bullseye. And getting that in place is really important, because then you can start to understand, how is this data going to be used? What sort of insights are people going to want to get from it, and how much data do we need to deliver? Which then also ties into the privacy points and the ethics points and everything around it. So it's really important to develop that understanding of who the stakeholders are, I'd say.
Yeah, excellent. Teresa, you wanted to come in?
Yeah. As someone who's been in the past and very recently a remote carer for someone with dementia over a period of 10 years, the ability to have simplistic data so that I could monitor from a way away, they could go out for a walk and come back, and that's all I needed to know. Their carers that were coming in could also monitor that is crucial. So if you have power of attorney over someone else, being able to follow that simple data, know they've gone out for a walk, I think that's all you need to know, and that you can do it from 60 miles away. That would have kept my mother particularly in her home for longer if we could have accessed that kind of simplistic data for a pair of socks. So to me, in the whole care situation, you're quite right, it's about what the person wants in the centre of it. But my mother didn't use any of the technology that the NHS turned up with, because she didn't like it, didn't wear it, couldn't charge it, and she turned it off all the time. Something that you could just stick in a sock and wash, something that would last for 3 months without me needing to worry about it.
Yeah.
And all I needed to know was, has she got home?
Yeah.
Has she got stuck at the supermarket? I've now got to drive 60 miles to go to get her, which she did a few times. So that, with her carers involved in that, who were local, not NHS, would have short-circuited and kept her in her home for longer, and would have kept her level of dementia static for longer. Moving her into a brilliant home was still completely different, and she did deteriorate.
Yeah.
And then she picked up as homeschool. But there's that whole.
But I think it also comes back to Richard's point on the different uses of the different data, because the simplified version of the data is great for you. It sounds like your mum wasn't interested in being involved at all, which is fine, because she doesn't need to be in that sort of way. But maybe her carers or a GP or some health supervisors could get, yeah, no, exactly, you know, could get more detailed information to help her along the journey further. Would you like to come in? And then I'll
come back on that one.
And then we'll go to you.
So there is with data, obviously, in your case,
Stuart, could you speak up a little bit for the microphone?
We'd have known where your mother was, or you'd have known where your mother was, and the app would have told you, you know, mum is here, and in terms of who has access to that data, but your mother specifically, it's just you. But then obviously with data, you can anonymize. So for example, on a bigger picture, you can say there are 300,000 people, 400,000 people using this kind of technology at the moment. What are the patterns you're seeing within it? And you can still guard the privacy of the individual and the civil liberties aspect of it by ensuring that in terms of that individual who's using it, then only their family and those who have power of attorney have access to it. If you choose to share that with the local constabulary for a period of time whilst there's an incident, then you can turn it on, turn it off. In terms of the bigger picture, hopefully wearable devices like this will produce a volume of data that would allow us to inform future decisions about how we care for people on a macro scale, whilst maintaining that civil liberty that is so important, what Laura was alluding to. But and it's something that the Alzheimer's Society and others are very vocal about their view that wearables are great, but we have to guard people's privacy, the civil liberties, that their right to privacy, and I really get that.
John, did you want to come in?
Just interesting, something Simon was talking about the care costs in the States, and that 30% of it was
the healthcare costs in the States.
Yeah. So two things really. I'm interested to know very, very loosely what that 30% consists of, firstly, and secondly, if that is the case, and that sort of applies to, say, the NHS at up to 25-30% potentially transferred over, that's political dynamite.
So it doesn't translate because the States has a different healthcare system.
No, that's not what I meant. What I'm trying to say is, if in the States there's a degree of healthcare, you've said the examples, forget it, but I'm saying if you use your product, let's say,
yeah,
you talk about a reduction in your need to go to appointments, that's a considerable sum.
Yep.
So again, there's 2 parts to the question. First bit was what is the 30% made up of the States?
Yeah.
And secondly, if you look at that drop in NHS costs in, for example, the UK,
yep,
politically, that's massive. And I'm just interested because I've not seen too much in the way of discussions about that. Actually, we've got a huge saving to make here with tech ongoing.
Okay, so I'll be relatively polite. Yeah. Okay, so in America, the 30% goes on stuff you don't need to get done. So you get a cut, you end up with stitches, and you end up with a tiny scar. Okay, all paid for by your insurance. Yeah. Then the doctor goes, actually, I can get rid of that scar for you with a bit of surgery, and you won't even see it. That's the 30%.
See.
Don't need to do it. And they do it because I had particularly interesting disagreement with a doctor in a car telling me that he was an entrepreneur. And I went, no, you're not, mate, you help people. He said, no, I'm doing it to make money. And I went, well, you're in the wrong game there. Okay, so that's one of them. And then the point here about dropping it, the NHS is probably one of the most amazing institutions I have ever seen. I think it's extraordinary. However, it has got to a point where there's this lot, and then there's everybody who does all the work down here, doctors, healthcare professionals, and then there's, I hope this don't get the NHS. Then there's this lot in the middle who do sod all, and it costs a fortune. So the point is, if you could save some money and get it a bit more remote, you could take costs out of the NHS that would be not related directly to your employment, but related to taking out this layer of people who don't do anything. Well, they probably do, but that's very unfair. They probably do a lot, but they don't do anything that gives you value for money. And I think I love the NHS model because it's free at the point of care. My partner's family, whenever you used to go along, they just look after them brilliant. I mean, utterly brilliantly. They're just amazing. But they need somebody to stand up in front of them and go, yeah, sorry, absolutely wonderful. There's 100,000 you should get us sort off, mate, because they don't need you. And they won't, because they won't, I'm not allowed to stand up in front of them in the candles and shorts. Do that, but yeah. That's what they need. And that's the point. The point I always make about the NHS is whenever I say something critical, people really have to go at me. And I'm not. It's remarkable. Absolutely remarkable what the quality of care you can get on it and stuff. But the amount of money you could save it is gigantic. See, I was talking to somebody earlier. So try and get these into the NHS. I may as well be telling them that I'm going to shoot their patients out of a gun because they think I'm going to hurt them. My job isn't to hurt them. My job is to give them something that makes them better. That's all my job is. Okay? I understand the rules and regulations, but could you make it less than 10 years, please? Could you make it 3? And then I'll be pushing at it all day long.
I did want to put this forward as a question to everybody who was speaking in terms of barriers to adoption. You know, how easy is it? And I know that Teresa does some work with that with some of her organizations. But how open is, for instance, the NHS, or how easy is it to get all of these technologies off the ground? Because we've heard some remarkable things today, and things that can really make a difference to people's life and really improve things an awful lot. How quickly can we see those, and what's the barriers of getting these adopted? I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, or whether I shouldn't have asked this question, but
to the original question, can we just revisit that one?
Of course, yes.
I think you were asking about the massive spend that Zeke identified that I talked about for dementia. Not only is there a massive spend currently, but it's going to exponentially increase because the population is aging at a tremendous rate. And I think
that's the good news story. That's the thing. That narrative amongst the stories of dementia, point about the thing being picked up in the press was really important. That sets that against that. Otherwise, at the minute, it looks very depressing.
Well, you know, it's a huge challenge. Can't change it. It's going to happen regardless. So I think the message that came across today is that the wearables technology that are being developed, and one of the stuff that Laura and Simon, Zeke have done. And I think if we can look at the fact that 40% we talked about of the 30 billion pounds a year that's being spent on dementia care at the moment is by private carers. And then there was that huge leap that Zeke's family experienced where they went from home care to private care, from sort of £500 a week to £1,500 a week. And if you just top that up with the millions of people that are going to be experiencing this, if you can delay that, if you can maintain the quality of life for somebody who has dementia, so that they can be at home, they can still walk, or you can know when they're becoming anxious because of the wearable technology, and you can maintain and widen that gap between them going from home and going into care, then it will have a tremendous impact upon the economy and upon people's personal financial experiences as well. So it's one of these things that isn't going to be a fix, but it is going to improve someone's quality of life. So that's what I sort of take away from your question there.
Yeah. So, does somebody want to tackle the question on when we get to see all this cool stuff everywhere?
Well, one of the things is, I think Zeke talked about the bullseye with lots of people around, the stakeholders, and Roy's talked about her user-centric and stuff. No, I think that's great, but there are some stakeholders that you have in that bullseye that are not necessarily helping you to get your product out. They're part of the process and they just don't help. So can somebody explain to me why they're there? And also, I think we have to look at it much more holistically. Like, we've all talked individually about things that we've done or we're doing, and there's some really cool tech and stuff, really like Zeke socks, particularly the very colourful ones for next year. But the point is that we have to stop thinking. So I do come from a completely different environment to my investors hate me. I'll tell you that now. They absolutely hate me because I don't do this for money. I do it so I can make the world a better place. So if we could come from that point of view, and you still should get paid and you still should make money and all those bits and pieces and stuff. But if you look at it from a holistic point of view, we should be able to make it easier, and we can't. And that's because there are people in that bullseye that are actually trying to slow you down because that's how they get paid. Now, that's not their fault. that's just something that's been done. That's got nothing to do with it. But nobody has that conversation going, well, actually, you don't need them anymore because it's just slowing us down. We can do it another way, save lots of money, and get it out there faster. But yeah, I've whittled on enough. Sorry.
I mean, Gopika, Laura, Zeke, have you experienced anything similar, or are there identifiable barriers for you guys?
I mean, in my opinion, I think the biggest barrier is probably around the procurement of the technology. How is it actually funded? NHS primarily want to see cost savings, which you're not always going to be able to evidence with these technologies, especially in the early stages. And that really is a death knell for them. Suddenly, local authorities just don't have a huge amount of funding. But I think the situation is changing. So we've got things like the virtual wards, which are coming online. There's a clear recognition that by keeping people out of hospitals, there is a cost saving, which is obviously what the NHS want. So they are willing to fund these things if you can provide that use case in the community that's going to deliver benefits for around the costs of providing care. So yeah, I think it's, the challenge is how do we collect the evidence that ultimately justifies the adoption? Because I think if we can do that, then the funding will come around us. But we need to be funded to get to that point, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, so it's very difficult.
Laura, Gopika, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think identifying who the payer is definitely one of our barriers at the moment. We're just not at that stage yet. We haven't been able to identify that rigorously enough yet. There's many different options, and it's almost like, well, which one do you choose first? Do you stick to the UK market? Do you go overseas to, say, Germany, to the EU, or to contact the FDA and work within the US? It's almost like, whatever decision you're going to make, you're going to face barriers at the end of the day. But I think, yes, cost effectiveness is really important, especially within the NHS. but I think they also, if we look at the sort of the medtech mandate and some of the things that come through with NICE and bits and pieces there, they are trying, that they're making that step, and they're trying to make to help innovation reach the NHS. Whether that's working or not is another question. But they're looking for, I mean, value is an important word here, isn't it? It's not just necessarily attributed to cost, but it's also attributed to what benefits you can have beyond costs, so to health in general. And if there are instances that I've seen where in the first place there is a loss, it's not necessarily cost effective in the first 2 years, but after that you start to see the benefits reap in. And I think that's also important for us as developers to understand, that it's not just okay, if you can't save money, then you shouldn't approach this, because there are people who wish to see their scores improved as a result of what they're currently scored on say stroke wards, dementia wards, etc., within hospitals. Yeah, so from my experience, it might not be everyone's experience, but I definitely see that there are glimmers of hope there.
Good, that's at least positive. Stuart?
Yeah, procurement is the key obstacle. We have a history of business to business and business to consumer, and it's relatively straightforward. And when it went to, we noticed that the Crown Commercial Service had a lot of opportunities where they were looking for GPS in lots of different environments, lots of different projects. So we thought we should start some of those conversations. And one of the first things we discovered was, in order to get on to through procurement with that particular government service, that you had to fulfill the contract to the government. So I was speaking to one of the procurement officers and said, "So how do we you do that? How do we fulfill a contract without actually being, as within your list of approved suppliers?" He said, "I'll just fulfill a contract." Said, "But you can't get a contract unless you're on this." So he said, "Yeah, and we went around in this big circle. Eventually went to got pointed to one of the the big household names that supply a lot of government contracts, from everything from prisons to all the rest of it." And the conversation sort of effectively went, "Yeah, we like what you're doing. We're going to sell it for this. You're going to sell it to us for this. We're going to charge us this." And I just, "No, I'm not doing that." So walked away from it, and then I've gone back through another route. But it's incredibly hard to get from a commercial, as a standalone commercial business, to get set up, within these procurement routes is very difficult, almost to the extent that you think it's been designed. I understand why it's that way to a certain extent, but it is very, very difficult.
Yeah. So
procurement is the number one thing. We're learning at a rate of knots and have got some footholds, but it's a shame, because I think small, medium-sized enterprises could bring so much to the NHS and to the government sector if they were allowed to a level playing field.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, lovely note to end on. Thank you. I mean, what I would say with that is that obviously organizations such as Medilink, Teresa's here, and to a certain degree the STC as well. I mean, we exist to help. So in whatever area that we can, approach